wouldn't say it was a traditional review, but it was in the traditional form of a review. That's all clumsy bullshit. You know, I'm trying to get to the
core thing,
to the core of what this Rolling Thunder thing is all about, and I don't have a clue because it's not. It's about nothing. It's just something that happened 40 years ago. And that's the truth of it.
Why don't we go down that road?
Okay, we can. Let's go.
All right, let's go.
I don't remember a thing about Rolling Thunder.
Okay.
I mean, it happened so long ago, I wasn't even born. You know.
Well, since both Dylan and myself weren't born in 1976, what's the worst that could possibly happen here today as we take a look at his 1976 album, Desire? There, look, it's that one. So in June 1975, whilst riding high off the back of Blood on the Tracks, Bob Dylan went to see Patti Smith and her band play live, and he was inspired by what he'd seen. He really liked Patti Smith and her backing band, and Dylan himself felt he'd never had a backing band before. Whenever he'd had a band with him, it had always been a band either formed for him or already assembled. So think of a band like The Band, for example. They started life as the Hawks. They existed many years before Dylan came along. He just hired them as a backing band. He'd never had his own band though, and he now wanted to have his own band. So impressed by the chemistry and improvisational style of Smith's group, Dylan would spend time again in Greenwich Village in New York, where he met bassist Rob Stoner and reconnected with Bob Newworth. Through these connections, Dylan recruited the musicians who would make up the Rolling Thunder Revue, while also exploring new ideas about improvisation and pushing himself creatively, particularly with language and songwriting. So in the summer of 1975, Dylan was writing new songs whilst he was recruiting the musicians that would form the Rolling Thunder Revue. Now, the most significant of these recruitments was arguably violinist Sara Rivera? I don't know, sorry, Rivera. We'll go with Rivera for the purpose of this video. Now, this is a really interesting story, the way it's being told. I don't know if this is dramatised a bit or not, but the way Dylan has told it, or Scarlett herself told it, is she was stood on a street corner somewhere with a violin in its case, and Dylan just drove past, and as he drove past, he seen her on the street corner, and he put the window down and said, "Do you want to be in my band?" And he just took her, and she said, "Yeah," and then they came to rehearse, which is quite crazy. I mean, imagine doing that, just picking a stranger up off the street and putting them in your band. Now, they rehearsed a number of songs. They would rehearse Isis, Mozambique, and One More Cup of Coffee in these initial rehearsals, and the violin on these influenced Dylan to think, yep, she's in the band, this is going to be what makes these songs, and the violin is arguably the most important part of Desire, musically anyway. So at the same time as all this going on, Dylan also developed a highly productive songwriting partnership with Jacques Levy. Jacques, it sounds very French, doesn't it? He's a playwright. Now, working together, they co-wrote many of the songs that would appear on Desire. I think 7 of the 9 songs on here are co-writes. The only 2 that aren't are One More Cup of Coffee and Sara. They're Dylan on their own, them 2 songs. But the rest of it, this album is a co-write. And that's a very rare thing. Dylan, I don't think up until this point really had ever done co-writes. And he's never really done it much since. So yeah, Mr. Levy is in a very, very small minority of people who have actually wrote a song with Bob Dylan. Anyway, most of the songs on here are story songs. This was something that Dylan was getting into more and more at this point, and obviously with Levy being a playwright, that was his line of work. That was what he did as a living. So the pairing here really worked well for Dylan. So the first recording sessions for this album took place in early July 1975, and to put it politely, they were very, very chaotic. They featured a large number of musicians. Now at this point, Dylan hadn't really streamlined the Rolling Thunder Revue. He didn't have the musicians that would form it by the time the first sessions for this took part. Eric Clapton was also in those early sessions, but he would walk out thinking it's too chaotic. But as he walked out, he told Dylan, "You need a smaller band here, this is far too big and chaotic." And Dylan, he was very frustrated during this period, and he would manage eventually to build a smaller and cohesive band. That would be done by the end of July. The core musicians here were Rob Stoner, Scarlett Rivera, Emmylou Harris, and Howie Waif, I think is how you pronounce it. The recordings at this point then became far more successful, and they established a distinctive sound that would become the staple of both Desire and the Rolling Thunder Revue tour. So like I say, those sessions in late July proved to be very productive. They would produce songs such as Hurricane or Sister. Sara was also produced there, and interestingly, when Sara was recorded, she was in the studio to watch him do it. Now, the final version of Hurricane that is on the album was actually recorded in October. They had to re-record that one due to some controversy, but we'll get onto all that in the track-by-track review in a moment. But before we go any further, that's kind of all I'm going to say in the background. I've summarised it here very much so because there's a hell of a lot to unpack here. If you want to know the full story, I do suggest you go and read up on this if you don't know it. Oh, there was a documentary made a few years ago. I think it was called Bob Dylan's Rolling Thunder Revue or something like that. It's on Netflix, it's worth a watch. It's good as well because it's got Bob Dylan actually being interviewed. He doesn't do that very often anymore. It's where that clip at the start of this video, start would be that way, wouldn't it, comes from. So yeah, that's worth a watch if you want to know the full story. That focuses mainly on the tour, but naturally when you're talking about the Rolling Thunder Revue tour, you can't not touch this album because they're sort of intertwined. But for the sake of this video, we're actually, well, the clue's in the title, we're reviewing and looking at the album, not the tour. So if you want to know more about the tour, then go and watch that documentary or read up on it. I'll tell you about the album as well, stuff I've missed out because I've just summarised the whole thing. Desire was released on January 5th, 1976, and by that time Dylan had actually already embarked on the Rolling Thunder Revue tour. It started in the autumn of 1975, and throughout that leg, the first leg of the tour, this tour only ever took place in America, by the way. So throughout that first leg, he actually debuted a few of the songs off this album, so by the time this album came out, people who had seen Dylan on that tour had already heard some of the songs on here. Anyway, the album itself, it reached number 3 here in the UK, it was a number 1 over in the States, and it was a critical success. It got critical acclaim from most of the critics. It was considered, since it came off the back of Blood on the Tracks, this little streak, it was considered part of this little streak Dylan went on in the mid-70s, where it was seen somewhat as a comeback, because after his motorcycle crash in '66, he was seen to sort of become less relevant in some ways to the critics. I don't agree with that, because I think John Wesley Harding and Nashville Skyline are fantastic albums. Some of his early 70 albums are a bit hitty-missy, I'll give you that. But yeah, a lot of people seen Blood on the Tracks as a comeback, and then I suppose technically in between those two albums was the Basement Tapes, but they came from '67, so this is really the proper follow-up to Blood on the Tracks. So yeah, he was on a little streak again at this point of, I wouldn't say, well, Blood on the Tracks is as good as those mid-60s albums. I don't know if this one is as good as those mid-60s electric albums, but again, we'll get onto more on that in the track-by-track review. But this was a controversial album when it came out. Hurricane and Joey were two very controversial songs. I'll touch more on the actual backlash around the songs in the track-by-track review in a moment. But before we do that, I'm going to show you this copy of the album I've got here. So, I picked this copy up in Zurich, in Switzerland, back in February. Picture of me holding it on screen now, if I remember, holding this album up at Lake Zurich. Anyway, that is the front cover. I don't know what this is. I'm assuming it'll be a European copy if I've got it from Switzerland, but yeah, there you go. There is the front cover, and there is the back cover. It's just same as everywhere else, really. I don't think there's anything spectacular about it. There's the sleeve there. It's got a picture of Dylan, plus there it lists the personnel, the Rolling Thunder Revue. I think actually, yeah, it even tells you the dates and everything it was written. Does it tell you the dates? No, it doesn't. It just says 1975 on it for some reason. Anyway, and it also gives you the story of the album, but I think it mainly focuses on Hurricane, does it? No, it doesn't. It does tell you about every track on the album. Hurricane. It tells you the story of Hurricane and about, I'll get onto that in track review and what it's about. But the rest of it there is the story of the songs of the rest of the album. No lyrics though, which is interesting for a Dylan album, being such a great lyricist, a poet. Especially when he's working with a playwright on here. He hasn't bothered to put the lyrics on. Anyway, there you go. There's your album background. We shall now dive into a track-by-track review of Desire. My desire is to do a track-by-track review of Desire. So we start off really strong here, and let's not beat around the bush, with an 8.5-minute masterpiece called Hurricane. This is a Dylan classic. It's the most famous song on the album by quite some distance, I would say, and yeah, it's one of his best songs he's ever done. Now, it's inspired by Reuben Hurricane Carter, who was a boxer, and he was imprisoned for murder, for triple murder in 1966, and Dylan feels that he was falsely accused of this, that he hadn't done it. It was a very divisive thing at the time. There was people who thought he had done it, people who thought he hadn't done it. So we'll get into the story of it here, but I do also have the Hurricane single. That is Reuben Carter himself there on the cover. Yeah, I don't own many Dylan singles. I only own this one and Positively 4th Street on 7-inch. So there you go. That's how much I like this song. I've bothered to buy the single, even though I've got it on here as well. So I should really put that there for the purpose of this first song. Anyway, the story of this song. So the original version of this song, before we do that, was recorded in July 1975. But when it was finished and put together and Columbia Records heard it, they said, some lawyers got involved and said, Bob, I think you should re-record this because he could have got sued for libel, because the witnesses, who he actually does still name check in this song, he said some quite unflattering things about them, shall we say, and they could sue him for libel because they were witnesses in the murder trial at the end of the day. So he was advised to change it, and thankfully he did change it, because the original version of this song, which has never been released, I don't actually think we've ever had a bootleg series covering this album specifically, so that's quite interesting. He's never done that. maybe it's for liable reasons why this has still never been released. But he re-recorded it anyway and did it a lot faster and changed the lyrics a little bit, and I'm pleased he did, because as interesting as it would be to hear the slow version, I do think the fast version is definitely where this song would be at its best. It would not be the song it is without its fast arrangement on here. Now, Dylan and the Rolling Thunder Revue will perform a number of benefit concerts for Reuben Carter. They would do one at Madison Square Garden, plus they would do one at the prison where Reuben Carter himself was at, so that must have been in December 75 because Dylan met him at that point. He would eventually get released from prison. He got his conviction overturned after a judge ruled in 1985 that he had an unfair trial. So yeah, he was then freed at that point, but it still remained a bit controversial about whether he did it or whether he didn't do it, because this song does paint it very much as if Reuben Carter is innocent, and it was all to do with race, which, yeah, okay, it is true that black people are targeted more by the law than white people. They get accused that they're more likely to go to jail basically than white people, especially back then. That's just a fact. Anyway, yeah, so we got out, but obviously there was the other side of it as well, that this song doesn't paint the fact that Reuben Carter did have a bit of a temper. He wasn't perhaps the nicest of people. Doesn't mean he's necessarily committed triple murder, but there we go. Anyway, let's talk about the song itself. It was obviously very controversial because of this matter, the fact that some people argued that yes, he did it, some argued no, he didn't, and it was very divisive for that reason, but depending on what side of the fence you were on. But musically here, it's a good song. It's got a nice little fast driving melody. The violin from Scarlet Riviera sounds very, very good on here. It drives the song along. It's about the only real fast rocker on the album, and this album would be a very, very different album without this song being as the opening track. Like I say, the original version, as interesting as it would be to hear it, I don't think it would be that strong a song in comparison to this finished version, because I imagine it's a bit slower and more methodical, is that the right word? Like a lot of the rest of the album, which would make it a bit of a slog, to be honest. So yeah, it's a good song to drive to, this. Anyway, Hurricane, I'm rambling on here, so let's move on and just say that this song is a masterpiece. It is one of the greatest songs ever recorded, I would say, to be honest. It's one of Dylan's best anyway. I absolutely adore this song with every ounce of my being. Here's the story of the hurricane. Next. So second on the album is a song called Isis, and you definitely wouldn't have been calling your song Isis 10 years ago, would you? Anyway, this is another story song about a young man recently married who leaves his wife to go on a journey in search of treasure and adventure. En route, he's deceived by a man to go with him and find a tomb, but when he discovers the tomb, he finds it's empty and doesn't contain the riches that he was hoping for. And it's at that point he realises the true purpose of his journey was not to find wealth, but to find human connection and loyalty. So realising the quest itself was a waste of time, he returns home to his wife, having learnt to appreciate her love and devotion. It's a great song, this one, I love it. I think it was the first thing that was recorded for the album. Once Dylan had condensed all those massive amounts of musicians he had in the studio down to this core band that would form the Rolling Thunder Revue, I think this was the first thing they got together and did. And yeah, it's a great song. Again, the violin drives this song, but there's also some very nice piano which drives it along as well. I think the piano in this song is played by Dylan. Sings this song brilliantly. The violin makes it, like I say. It's a fantastic song. It's a sort of Dylan classic with us hardcore fans. It's not one of his more well-known songs. Most people would see a song called Isis these days and think, what are you doing a song called Isis for? Especially when it's a love song. That makes it even stranger now. But yeah, anyway, it's a good song, Isis. I like it a lot. So Mozambique is the title of the third track on the album, and it's an interesting one, this, because when this song was recorded, Mozambique itself had just come out of a war with Portugal where it was fighting for its independence, and it won its independence. So when the residents of Mozambique, who were in favour of independence, seen this song, they thought, oh, Bob Dylan's done us a song about our independence cause. But when they listened to it, they were a bit underwhelmed and disappointed, because the song itself is about a romantic getaway, just going on holiday basically to Mozambique. Apparently all this song was Dylan and Levy, when they wrote this song, this is a co-write, they were trying to see how many times they could rhyme words that ended in eek. And yeah, that's basically all this song is. So it's just really a throwaway song, it's just a bit of fun. But that comes across on the recording of this song. It's a fun song. I like it. The band are playing fantastic on it. It's nothing serious, just a bit of fun. So track 4 is entitled One More Cup of Coffee, open brackets, Valley Below, close brackets. And this is one of the 2 songs on the album that Dylan wrote on his own. It's not a co-write, this one. Now it tells the tale of a beautiful but emotionally distant woman from a wandering, drifting family and a man who must leave her behind. Although the man admires her deeply and is in love with her, he realises that her loyalties lie elsewhere and his feelings are not returned and replicated by her. Now it's a duet, this song, between Dylan and Emmylou Harris, who's one of the backing singers in the Rolling Thunder Revue. And it's interesting this, because every time I hear this song, not just this song, it's a common trend with a few of the songs on this album, I hear her voice and I think, oh, that's Stevie Nicks singing on there. It sounds like it's a duet between Dylan and Stevie Nicks. Emmylou Harris and Stevie Nicks have very similar sounding voices, that sort of raspy, sort of distinct vocal style. It's maybe just me that hears that, but anyway. Yeah, it's got a bit of it's a sort of Spanish sounding song, this, in its melody. It works really well. It's a great little arrangement. And yeah, it's a decent song, this one, I like it. So closing out side one of the album, we find a track called Oh Sister, and this song is basically a call for reconciliation between the radical feminists of the mid-70s and men, basically. Power to the women, of course. Do love women around here. Anyway, there's some nice lyrics on here. Oh sister, when I come and knock on your door, don't turn away. You'll create sorrow. Time is an ocean, but it ends at the shore. You may not see me tomorrow. Now, again, Emmylou Harris is singing the backing vocals on here, which creates this very nice duet style between her and Dylan. And again, it's got that Stevie Nicks vibe to it. Now, I've got to be honest with you here. From this point onwards, really, on the album, the melodies and the music, they all become a bit samey. They're the same sort of speed and the same sort of style for the most part, with the same instruments doing sort of the same things pretty much for the most part. There's the odd additional instruments on odd tracks here and there, but it does make the album sort of, from this point, blend into one. It's not a complaint, that, it's just an observation that the songs do become a bit samey from here on in, but the lyrics remain fantastic across the whole album. So kicking off side 2 of the album, we find an 11.5-minute song called Joey, and this is somehow the most controversial song on the album, more controversial than Hurricane. Bearing in mind, I didn't say it when I was talking about Hurricane. Hurricane, the song, features the N-word in it. Bob Dylan says the N-word. Now that still riles people up to this day, the fact that Dylan says that in this song, and yet somehow this song remained even more controversial than that. So this song here, it's about a New York gangster called Joey Gallo, aka Crazy Joe, and the song portrays him as a principled outlaw who protected his family, avoided harming innocent people, and sought peace rather than violence. Dylan, who was influenced by stories from Gallo's friends and co-writer Jacques Levy, viewed him more as a tragic folk hero than a criminal, but the song sparked major controversy because many critics and journalists argued that it romanticised Gallo and ignored well-documented aspects of his violent criminal life. Now in 2009, Dylan decided to do the dirty on Levy and throw him under the bus. I think he was gone by this point, so he couldn't stick up for himself, but basically Dylan came along and said, I didn't write this song, Jacques Levy wrote all the lyrics himself, I just sang them. When he wasn't here to defend himself and counter that point. So yeah, that's an interesting point, that Dylan has somewhat washed his hands of this song because it's that controversial. Anyway, there's some very nice lyrics on here. There's a one where towards the back end of the song where he's singing about how, I can't remember the exact wording, but he wouldn't use a gun around children because he didn't want to influence this and let them see that style of life. He didn't want children to know what a gun is, basically, which is nice. But yeah, I think the big issue a lot of people had with this song was the fact that it was all recent history. You know, if you're going to write about outlaws like, well, Robin Hood, for example, you know, that obviously that's fictitious. Or even like from the old American West, which, you know, that by that point was what, 1975, so that'd be a good 100, 150 years ago, all of that. So it's not exactly recent history. Whereas Crazy Joe being shot, that was, I think it happened in 1972. So it was only 3 years before this song was recorded. And here's Dylan romanticising him when potentially families of people who had been his victims are listening. It's not the best look in the world, I must admit. Now, Hurricane, I can understand the controversy around that. That one kind of works though, because it's also quite a good pop song in some ways, Hurricane. Whereas this one, it's not a pop song. It's a story song properly, and it doesn't help with its melody on this song. It's a very slow sort of plodding song, I would describe this. It plods along. Which means you can't really disguise what the lyrical content is in the melody, if that makes sense. It's kind of modern. He doesn't do this live anymore. I think he played this song up until the 90s. He doesn't play anything live off this album anymore. He hasn't for a long, long time. But this song, interestingly, was the one that he did live the most. He kept this one going longer than anything else on the album, bizarrely. But yeah, this, like as we're going to say, this does sound a bit modern Dylan. It wouldn't sound out of place, maybe with a slightly different arrangement on an album like Rough and Rowdy Ways. This obviously would have modern Dylan singing it, but it is a very, very story-driven song, as with the rest of the album. Anyway, to conclude with this song, it's not a bad song. It's good. It plods along a bit, but yeah, it's not my favourite song he's ever done, but it's all right, I suppose. So next up on the album is a track entitled Romance in Durango, and guess what? This is another song about an outlaw. Now this time this is an outlaw on the run with his lover in Mexico, and the song, it sounds very Mexican in its arrangement. It's got some very Spanish guitar sounding stuff on here, plus we've got violin as usual on the rest of the album, which gives it this Mexican flavour, plus there's an accordion on here which sounds really cool. Eric Clapton plays the guitar on this song. This is the only song on the album where it's sort of got a wider cast of musicians rather than the core Rolling Thunder Revue. Yeah, it's a bit of a unique song for that reason. It gives it that sort of different sound to the rest of the album because it's got different musicians on it. There's not massive amounts to say about this song other than I like it. It's got a good arrangement on it, and it's also got some Spanish lyrics on the chorus, which sounds really cool. It adds to this sort of atmosphere. It is very atmospheric, this song. So yeah, I like it very much. It's a very atmospheric song. I like that. So the penultimate track on the album is entitled Black Diamond Bay, and guess what? It's another story song. Now this tells the story of the destruction of a tiny island which is being destroyed by the eruption of a volcano, and it's told from two perspectives. So firstly there's the perspective of the people who are on the island. Most of them are completely oblivious to the destruction that is about to occur to them, and the other perspective is from a narrator who's watching all this chaos and destruction unfold on the TV. Now interestingly, from these two perspectives, this is a typical Dylan sort of jokey kind of thing. He's got this character in this song who's on the island, who's about to commit suicide, but before he can kill himself, the volcano basically does it for him. And then we have the narrator, who's a bit of a prick really, because he's watching it on the TV and he gets bored of watching it. Basically, he thinks to himself, I don't care, I'm not there, I'm never going to go there, this doesn't affect my life whatsoever, so instead he goes to the bar and has a beer instead. So it is in some ways maybe admire sort of a reflection of the human condition about how different people view different events, how while someone is being killed and it's happening on TV, but people are watching this happen, other people are watching it and getting bored and going off and getting on with their lives. Yeah, there is definitely a social commentary, that's the word I wanted, in this song, hidden in the lyrics anyway. Yeah, what have I got written down here? So it's an interesting song, this one. The music is a little bit faster than most of the songs on side 2. It's not my favourite song in the world, it's decent enough, I like it, but yeah, it's okay. And finally we come to Sara, a song written solely by Dylan and arguably his most personal and autobiographical song he has ever done at any point in his career. Now, addressing his wife Sara directly in this song, it draws on real life events and details of their marriage, which is very much uncharacteristic of Dylan. He doesn't really talk about his personal life, he never has done. Like for example, when I did my review of Blood on the Tracks, I had no idea that Bob Dylan even had a brother until I researched for that album. And yeah, so it's very, very rare he talks about his personal life, and here he is being very brutally open about his marriage and his feelings and his love for his wife. Now he's both declaring the love that he has for Sara whilst also sort of mourning the loss of the relationship in his marriage, so it's sort of a song of two halves. Yeah, it's very, like I said, it's very rare we see Dylan being this open, and there is some absolutely beautiful lyrics on here. My favourite being, so easy to look at, so hard to define. It's yeah, it's fantastic. So not only is Dylan here making it openly clear this song is about Sara, he also admits that he wrote Sad-Eyed Lady of the Lowlands on Blonde 10 years earlier about her, which again, that's about the only time we've ever had Dylan come out and openly admit that a song is written about his personal life, and he does it in a song like this. Now, when I reviewed Blood on the Tracks, I obviously spoke about how Dylan himself flatly refuses that album is written, he says it's not written about his crumbling marriage, it's inspired by a Russian author, but I've always thought that's bollocks, it is about his crumbling marriage and that's just a distraction story. Well, the fact that on the next album he writes a song called Sara, directly addressing his wife and their crumbling marriage, kind of reinforces for me the idea that Blood on the Tracks is definitely about his crumbling marriage. Now, when he recorded this song, he was obviously trying to be very brave because Sara was in the studio watching him pour his heart out behind a microphone. I mean, that must have been quite a sight to witness, but it obviously didn't work. Less than 2 years after this was recorded and this album was released, the pair were divorced, which, yeah, I think would definitely hit Dylan very hard when you hear what he's singing here. Anyway, it's a highlight of the album, this, and I absolutely love it. It's very, like I say, it's very, very rare we get Dylan doing something like this, but when he does, this is about the only time, and I suppose really he won't admit it, but Blood on the Tracks as well, he does it with great power and affection in his words. So yeah, it's a fantastic closing track on the album, this, to close a brilliant album. So overall, Desire continues this streak of great albums that Dylan was releasing in the mid-70s, but I've got to be honest, Blood on the Tracks is considerably better than this album. There's some really good songs on here, but there's only really 3 songs to me that come close to anything on Blood on the Tracks that are as good as anything on Blood on the Tracks, and that's Hurricane, Isis, and Sara. The rest of the album is good, but I just feel it's not in the league of Blood on the Tracks or those other 3 songs. And side 2 of this album as well, I just feel it plods along a bit too. It's a bit too slow. I mean, there's nothing wrong with slow songs, but there's just nothing that really drives the songs along. I mean, even like Blood on the Tracks, okay, they're all quite depressing songs when you think about it, but he's found a way to make them quite light-hearted and upbeat with the melodies, and he doesn't do that on here. The songs are all quite plodding, like I say. Now that maybe sounds like a criticism, and it's not supposed to, because it works on here. The songs being slow and plodding, it works. The album would be very different if it wasn't like that, and it flows perfectly, this album, and all the songs. The fact they blend into one also is the sort of strength of this album. But it means you've kind of got to be in the right mood to listen to it. You have to be in the mood where you want to sit down and properly focus on the lyrics here, because otherwise, if you just want to sit down and, you know, casually have an album on in the background, this one ain't going to be the one, because you're going to hear some of these songs and zone out and then zone back in and think, what the hell is he talking about? You know, Hurricane, there's a reason why Hurricane is probably the most popular song on here, because it's the only real pop song on here. It's the only real song you can, you know, dance to. Here's the story of the hurricane and all of that. Now, obviously, this album is shrouded in the legend of the Rolling Thunder Revue tour and the band. And perhaps that legend is what propels this album to such great heights. I'm making it sound like I don't like this album, and I do really like it, but I just feel I have to be in the right mood for this album, if it makes sense. It is very rare that I listen to this album from start to finish. Normally, if I'm listening, I'll listen to Hurricane, Isis, and Sara, like I say, but the rest of it, I've got to be in the mood for. I'm just repeating myself here, so shall I stop repeating myself and just conclude this video? Because overall, it's a good album. It's obviously a controversial album to this day, because Hurricane itself, Dylan saying the N-word, is it's very controversial in this day and age. It's probably more controversial now than it's ever been, but doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. Yeah, he's not a racist, Bob Dylan. You certainly can't say that about him based on some of the stuff he's done over the years. Anyway, I'm going to conclude this video here. So yeah, it's a good album. You've just got to be in the right mindset to listen to it. Anyway, what do you think of this album? Do you like it? Do you not like it? Let me know down in the comments, please. I'd be very interested to hear what you think of this album. If you've enjoyed this video, please do like the video, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you're new around here, that would be greatly appreciated. And that's all I'm going to say for now, so thank you very much for watching, and I will see you all on a future video. But for now, goodbye.